interesting. We had a kind of tricky problem to solve, because how do you become an established firm in an industry where the established firms have been around for a very long time and have a very long track record? And so we became very intrigued with the talent agency business, because William Morris had been around since 1898. And CAA got started in 1975, and yet CAA was able to get to 90% share by 1990. And so when we saw that, we thought, wow, there's a model for transforming a very established industry by changing the way the organization worked. And we happen to know Michael, and that's how it all got started.
What were the parts of the talent agency model that really appealed to you?
The big thing and the big difference was traditionally talent agencies had been basically a collection of talent agents. So, every agent had the same job, and they all got paid 10% commission, which was the most you could get by law. And that's just basically how it worked. And then you had people in the mailroom, and you had secretaries, but that was it. What Michael did was he deferred the salaries of the founding agents. So none of them took salaries, and he used that money to build what he referred to as the franchise, or the team, which were kind of specialists who develop their network in various areas. So he had a specialist for international, a specialist for music, a specialist for book publishing. And on the basis of that, there became one network for the firm. And that was CAA, and that's how he began to completely transform the entertainment industry. And like the entertainment industry looks nothing like it did in 1975, thanks to Michael.
So let's talk about how that model is now applied here.
Yeah, so basically, if you think about venture capital, it's worked the exact same way. So you have partners, and those partners all have, they know, just like talent agents knew heads of movie studios and so forth, that's exactly like general partners in a VC firm. They know customers, and they know executives, and they know entrepreneurs. So they're all their own independent networks. But typically in a venture capital firm, that's most of the employees are general partners. At Andreessen Horowitz, we sort of turn that upside down and say most of the employees are the team or the franchise or the network. So if you look at inside, Andreessen Horowitz has 6 general partners and over 40 people in the firm. Most VCs would have the opposite ratio. And the reason is we're doing what CAA did. We're building dedicated networks with dedicated teams to give basically a much more kind of robust functionality.
When you went out and started pitching the firm, you were talking to your investors and telling them that you thought it would take you about 10 years for this model to gain traction. Here we are less than 3 years later, and I'm sure all of your investors would say that they consider you a success. So why the 10-year time frame, and what do you think caused the catalyst to move forward? Yeah,
well, it turns out Michael Ovitz, a lot's been written about him, but one thing that hasn't, he's an organizational genius. I mean, it is amazing how well the model he developed for the entertainment industry applied to the venture capital industry. I mean, basically word for word, step for step, right down to the titles that we give our people are identical to the early CAA. And it just worked, and that was a shock. We just did not expect it to translate that well. We thought we would have to make a lot of adjustments, which we didn't. The second thing was really timing. And we benefited from the fact that because of things like social networking and the kind of big build out of the internet, entrepreneurs really spent a lot of time with each other, which hadn't been the case kind of in previous generations of venture capital firms. So as our message came out, it went viral pretty quickly. And then I think the final thing was we were transparent, and that had a bigger benefit than we thought. So by saying kind of publicly, this is what we think about building a company, this is how you ought to fire an employee, this is how you ought to deal with an underperforming executive, this is how you ought to handle politics. That was just very different, and turned out to be a big differentiator. You wouldn't think it would be a big differentiator, but it was. And those things kind of combined to elevate us much faster than we thought possible.
Well, talking about telling your story, you write a very well-read blog. Mm-hmm. So talk about how that came to be and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it was kind of, that was interesting, because some of it was just I wanted to get some stuff off my chest. When you're a public company CEO, you can't really say what I say on my blog without getting fired. So it was kind of a chance for me to express myself, but what it kind of ended up becoming was a way for us, as a founder of the firm, for a way to us as a firm kind of express our whole philosophy of how you build a company. What's been amazing about that is that it's really, really resonated with entrepreneurs. And I get calls and letters, and every time they come in, they see me, they go, Ben, like, oh, this, I was struggling with this, and like, there it is. And I was like, how'd you know? And I was like, well, because I like struggled with the same thing. And it's funny, everybody thinks I'm a great CEO, and I'm like, well, all those things I write are all the things that I screwed up, right? Like I learned them all the hard way. So I'm glad I'm a great CEO now, but it wasn't always the case.
Last question for you, and that is about the Skype deal. You talked to me about how that was kind of an important moment, that that you took a risk and obviously paid off, but your investors were very concerned about what you were trying to do.
Yep.
And I know you had a philosophy when you started about seed investment versus different stage investment.
Right.
So let's put that against the context of what you did with Skype.
Yeah, so when we started the firm, and it kind of goes back to what you asked me originally, which is like, we didn't really think that we were going to be a top tier VC firm quickly. We thought that would take a very long time. And so we thought that our insertion point into the market would be seed investing, and then we would kind of parlay that into a good presence in venture and growth. And we did say we would parlay it into a venture and growth, but what happened with Skype was we had the opportunity to invest in it as like really our first major investment. It was like a quarter of the fund in Skype, which was a very controversial deal at the time. In fact, most people who wrote about it basically wrote we were idiots. And so when you have, when you have something like that, that is so traumatizing to the people invested, because like, one, it's different, and then two, it seems excessively risky, and three, completely undiversified, then it's a real test. Like, if that didn't work, that would have been problematic, because it'd be like the biggest I told you so ever. But it turns out with investing, all great investments look extremely controversial at the time. And there's no way around this, because if they looked like a great investment, they wouldn't be a great investment, because everybody would know that, and it would price in. And we were very confident that we understood Skype in a way that other people didn't. Mark was on the board of eBay. We knew a lot about the company. And we were confident enough that it was the right decision, maybe naive about how people would interpret it. But when it worked, given the backdrop, it gave people a lot of confidence in our judgment on other things, and that's enabled us to have a lot of degrees of freedom in how we operate.